on 1891. The Bark ship Dictator, Norwegian Bark ship Dictator, sunk right off of our coast. It was Good Friday. And that's why you would know my name. But first, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I am from Scotstoy and Norway. And I grew up on the island loving the sea. I loved everything about the sea. I loved the ships. I loved the boats that took me to the mainland. I loved my fishing village. I loved all of it. I loved it so much that I fell in love with a man who was a seaman. His name was Jørgen Jorgensen. I married him and we traveled together. Now, it wasn't common for women to be on board the ships at that time, but Jørgen loved me and I loved the sea, so it worked out pretty well for us. And he'd take me on his voyages. We even had our son in New Zealand on one of our voyages. We even named him Carl Zeeland Jorgensen in honor of his birthplace. So 4 years after we had had Carl, we were invited, Jørgen was invited to be the captain of a bark ship named Dictator. It was not a brand new ship. It was in good shape. It was seaworthy. And I was so excited because the trip was to the United States to pick up a load of Georgia pine, the yellow pine. And I thought, oh, March in the United States, that's early spring. I so looked forward to it. Jørgen was not happy about the idea of Carl and I joining him on the ship, but I convinced him. And he finally agreed to allow us to accompany him on the trip to pick up that lumber. The voyage from Moss, Norway, down to Pensacola, Florida was pretty uneventful. We pulled into Pensacola, picked up our cargo, and that smell of fresh wood, the pine and the hull of our boat, oh, nothing like fresh cut wood. But it filled the hull to a point where we were low in the water. But I had all the confidence in the world of Jørgen's ability to pilot the ship, even though we were resting low in the water. So we left Pensacola, came down through the Gulf of Mexico, down to the Florida Keys, and up and around towards Bermuda, where we would then head off to England to deposit our cargo, and then back to Moss, Norway, in time for that beautiful spring, that Norwegian spring where the meadows are starting to bloom and the snow is still resting under the trees. Oh, have we looked forward to it? But as we got to South Carolina, we ran into some trouble. The wind started to rise from the northeast. There was waves that started to crash across the bow of our boat since we were sitting so low in the water. We even lost some of our railing from a wave that hit across the bow and knocked the railing off the ship. The rain started to fall. The wind was starting to howl. We were listing in the water. We ended up with a hole in our bow. The water was coming into the ship, and at that moment, our pumps broke. Our crew worked very hard to get the pumps back up and working, but they just didn't seem to be able to fix it. So the men, the crew of our ship, were pumping the water out manually. It was hard labor and work. That's when Cornelius Nielsen came to Jørgen and said, our crews cannot continue this level of work to get the water out of the ship. We need to put in and get the ship fixed. Jørgen was anxious to deliver the pine on time, but he realized there was no way we were going to make it all the way across to England. So we worked our way up the coast, South Carolina. We got to North Carolina. We were limping along. The storm was still raging around us. We were still in peril. The men were still working those bilge pumps by hand. We get to North Carolina and we pass the Outer Banks, known as the graveyard of the Atlantic. We get back and we see the false Cape Light. We were looking for them. The good news is they were looking for us. We were spotted by false Cape Light, and they let the captain of the Cape Henry life-saving station know there is a ship out on that sea and it's in distress. We were spotted by the SeaTac life-saving station, and then as we came up the coast, Princess Anne Hotel, the guests who were watching the storm spotted us out in the ocean. They also called Captain Drinkwater of the Cape Henry station and reported our ship in distress. By then, the captain had, Drinkwater of the life-saving station, had already pulled his man together. They had already loaded the Lyle gun on a cart with a donkey to pull it out onto the beach. We were listening along. We were coming up the coast. That's when Jürgen decided to point the ship directly at the shore so that we could get as closely as we could so they could rescue us. And with the din of the wind coming in from the northeast, the waves crashing onto our ship, the rain and all of the sound that goes with those horrible storms was overpowered by the sound of us hitting along the sandbank. There was a sandbar 350 yards out. I could hear the ship cracking below us. It was terrifying. The wind and the weather and the sea slashing against the ship. We now had a large hole in the hull. We were 350 yards out. The Lyle gun is on the beach. The Lyle gun can shoot 250 yards with a life-saving cable that we could use to get the men and Carl and myself to shore. The Lyle gun went off. It's a cannon. They shoot the cord to us. The line is too heavy. It lands 100 yards ahead of the ship. He pulls it back in. Captain Drinkwater orders it again, puts a lighter line on. He shoots it again. It is now just 25 yards from the ship. On the third try, the line makes it to our ship. Our crew works quickly and ties it off. Then comes this contraption on another line. It's called the breeches buoy. It's just a lifesaver with a pair of pants attached to it. It's a horrifying thing. And the wind is blowing it all over the place. Jürgen looks at the crew and says, "Who volunteers to try this first to get to shore?" And our youngest crew member, Mr. Mills, volunteers. He gets into the breeches buoy. It's pulled up around him. He's on the lines. He starts out to the shore, and that's when the ship lists and he's dunked into the water. And then the ship rights and he's pulled up out of the water and into the air, and he's dunked and pulled out of the water, and he's drowning, and I can see it from the ship, but there's nothing I can do. Finally, the crew pulls him back on board our ship and drowned. I'm totally frightened of this contraption now. But the lines are twisted, so it's not going back to the shore until the crew on our ship and the crew on the beach can get it all straightened out. They finally get it straightened out. It is now gone from when we hit the sandbar at 10:45 to 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It has taken us all this time in all of that weather to get this thing straightened out. And Jürgen says, "Who wants to try now?" Mr. Mills volunteers again. He gets put into the breeches buoy. He starts out. The crew on the shore is pulling the lines taut. Our crew on the ship is pulling the lines taut. They are sending him. He's dipping in and out of the water, but not nearly as violently as before. He makes it to the shore. Now it's starting to get dark. Jürgen looks at the crew. He chooses 4 of our best rowers, the strongest rowers that are out there. He puts them in the last of our life-saving boats that was available, our lifeboats. They work their way onto shore. Now, before they left, Jürgen had instructed them, if you get safely to the shore and you feel that the boat can come back and take the rest of us, head to the north end of the beach, signal us with your hats, and we will pull the boat back to our ship. If you don't feel it's safe, head to the south end of the beach and wave your hats down at the southern end of the beach. We waited. No signal came. The storm still raged on. The ship was starting to break around us. Two of our crew, who were strong swimmers, just dove off the end of the boat. Off the end of the ship, they were swimming to shore. They were going to make it. We had nothing else to do. One of our crew members climbed the mast. He said, I don't know how to swim. I'll keep an eye out. I'm feeling the water fill up around us. I'm watching the deck start to tip towards the water. I'm standing as far back as I can with Carl in my arms, and there comes Jürgen. He's got the last two life preservers. He puts one tight up around me. He takes the other, and he takes Carl out of my hands. He ties Carl to his chest, puts on the last life preserver. He said, I have saved the ship's ladder for us to be able to get to shore. I have no idea. I don't want to get in that water. It's awful. But he is confident that we can get to shore on the ship's ladder. So Jean-Baptiste, one of our crew, is standing with me. He's holding me. He's helping Jürgen lower the ladder into the water. Carl and Jürgen step off the boat and into the ladder. Right as a wave comes and pulls the ladder into the hull of the ship, there's pine floating around. The wave subsides and it pulls him back out. He's on the ladder. He goes under. And when he comes up, Carl is gone. He is no longer with him. And I can see Jürgen frantically looking around him. I start to search the water, but it's too dark and we can't see anything. The ladder gets pulled further and further towards the shore. Mr. Baptiste and I are standing on what's left of the deck. A wave comes and washes us overboard. Jürgen made it to the shore, half drowned. He lifted his head and he saw the fire burning by the Cape Henry life-saving station. He picked himself up to make his way to the life-saving station, where two of Mr. Drinkwater's, Captain Drinkwater's crew saw him. They went up the beach to assist him. They carried him back to the life-saving station. He walked in and met up with 9 crew who had made it to shore. They were warming themselves by a fire. Well, as these storms work, the next day it's clear and beautiful. And Jürgen walked the beach, searching for me and Carl. But we were not to be found that day. 6 of the crew members were found. Their bodies were put together, and then on Easter Sunday, my body washed on shore. Mr. Harry D. Oliver took all of us to Elmwood Cemetery in Norfolk, Virginia, right off of Princess Anne Road, where we were buried. The people of the Princess Anne Hotel who had witnessed all of this unfold donated flowers to us for our gravesite. Jürgen collected, and it's been said, he collected several of the flowers in commemoration of me. He kept those flowers. He left for Baltimore and then back on to Moss the day before Carl's body was found. Mr. Oliver, in his kindness, brought Carl to the grave and buried him next to me, where we rest in peace. So you know how it is when a ship breaks up on the shore. There were beachcombers out looking at the pine, seeing if they could retrieve any parts of our ship. Mr. Crittenden had a flat buggy that he had out on the beach, And the young woman who had seen us from the observation tower at the Princess Anne Hotel noticed out in the surf a large piece that was floating in and out. She asked Mr. Crittenden to retrieve it, and he got some of his workmen to come out and pull it to shore. It was the figurehead from our ship. She was a buxom, beautiful figurehead, and he had her placed in the honor for the lost souls from the sinking of the Dictator. She stood there for 62 years until, ironically, a hurricane washed her away. It was then that the shipbuilding company in Moss, Norway, determined that they wanted to commemorate the loss of the Dictator, the 7 souls who were lost, the 10 men who were saved. And they hired Mr. Bast, an artist, who created not 1, but 2 Norwegian ladies. One to be erected in Moss, Norway, facing Virginia Beach, the other in Virginia Beach, facing Moss, Norway. And on her pedestal says, "I am a Norwegian lady. I stand here as my sister before me, in the hopes that all men who are out to sea can find their way home safe." Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Just to let you know, Norwegian Lady ceremony is May 28th, and we have a